The former USSR was a place of strict controls and censorship. But since the fall of the Iron Curtain, case files of the unexplained have slowly started to emerge from deep within the Soviet archives. These files tell of bizarre phenomena, monstrous creatures, and sinister occurrences.
All of a sudden his eyes flickered, and it seemed to everyone in the room that he was coming back to life.
These incredible stories come from all over the former Soviet Union, from times of fear and uncertainty.
Where you have speculation without facts, you have mystification and myth.
With eyewitness testimony, declassified records, and expert insight, we can now uncover the truth behind Soviet Russia's unexplained mysteries. Russia's unexplained mysteries date right back through the Soviet era. This was a time when the Communist Party ruled with an iron fist. Information was restricted, leading to hearsay and rumor.
In our attempts to rationalize what's going on around us without facts and information, we resort to speculation, conspiracy, and mystification.
But sometimes information was simply passed on by word of mouth. A disturbing story has come to light of a place believed to exist deep in the remote forests of Siberia. It's called the Devil's Cemetery. Many who seek it never return. Those who do tell stories of an unnatural force. Many claim it's the entrance to the underworld. Russian explorer and believer in the paranormal, Alexander Rempel, has been there.
The story of the Devil's Cemetery dates back to 1908. What many people saw was a burnt clearing with piles of bones and a smoking hole in the center.
Rumors start to spread throughout the nearby villages.
People started to notice that animals got sick and died after walking through this place. They would see a wild animal, like a deer, running through the Devil's Cemetery, and then it would fall down and die.
To warn people from entering, the locals carve the face of the devil on one of the trees. Rempel says the carving keeps people away, but he also believes the effects of this cursed land spread beyond its boundaries.
Two-headed calves began to be born in nearby villages. Domestic animals had grown strange spurs, and villagers began to have mental disorders. Children began to be born with various abnormalities, including eye displacements.
Rempel claims the government was compelled to act to protect the surrounding population. Soon the whole area is evacuated. But the mystery remains.
Mysteries and paranormal activities were never investigated in the former Soviet Union. It was forbidden.
The exact location of the Devil's Cemetery is lost. But the legend is not forgotten. In the 1980s, details of this disturbing place once again come to light. Intrepid teams set off to try and locate the fabled Devil's Cemetery. But many don't return. Around 75 people are known to have disappeared. Are they defeated by the remote Siberian terrain? Or is a more sinister force at work?
People think having a toothbrush and toothpaste in their backpacks is enough to survive in the taiga. It took us 2 years to train for the expedition.
Not put off by the deadly odds against him, in 1991, Alexander Rempel puts together his own team. They head to the remote Irkutsk region in the heart of Siberia. Using clues from decades-old sources, he has vague map references and details of nearby landmarks. For several days they search the forests, but find nothing. Just as they are about to give up, they stumble upon what appears to be the grotesque marker.
A big face was carved on the tree at the height of a man's head. We saw the clearing. Its radius was approximately 10 meters. There was a hole in the center. The hole led underground.
The area is barren, dotted with scorched tree trunks. As they approach, strange things begin to happen.
Our compass stopped working when we approached the Devil's Cemetery. The compass needle started spinning.
Other instruments also start producing bizarre readings.
Our electromagnetic sensors show the intensity of exposure equal to measurements under high voltage wire.
Then things take a turn for the worse. As they explore the area, members of Rempel's team start to feel sick.
What scared us the most was numbness of arms and legs, as well as awful toothache and headache. We felt like staying there for a long time would let this numbness spread all over our bodies and make it impossible for us to move.
The group feel that something very peculiar is going on here. Fearing for their lives, they beat a hasty retreat.
We did not sleep that night. We found no animal tracks on the ground. We saw no birds in the sky. But for blowing wind, it was almost perfectly silent.
Before he leaves, Rempel puts up a sign bearing the names of his team members and the date of their expedition. If Rempel's story is true, it suggests something strange is going on. The dead animals, the sickness, the odd effects. So is there a rational explanation for such bizarre phenomena? Charles Harrison of Southampton University has a theory that may explain the bizarre phenomena.
Russia is extremely prone to peat fires. These underground fires can keep going for years and be releasing all kinds of noxious gases. They can start many miles away and then spread underground.
Subterranean fires have been known to rage for decades. Several are known today around the world. In the USA, the once thriving town of Centralia in Pennsylvania was abandoned due to an underground coal fire. And in Turkmenistan, a pocket of natural gas has burned since 1971 and shows no sign of stopping. Such a fire burning deep under the Siberian wilderness could throw out noxious gases, killing wild animals in their tracks.
The culprit is likely to be carbon monoxide, which is deadly to humans and animals, but it's completely colorless and has no smell.
This could explain the animal deaths and the sickness in Rempel's team. But an underground fire would not affect scientific instruments. Another theory says the cause is not of this world. At around 7:40 a.m. on the 30th of June 1908, a column of bluish light shoots across the Siberian sky. What is thought to be a huge meteor explodes. It devastates an area known as Tunguska, some 250 miles north of the location of the Devil's Cemetery. 80 million trees are flattened across an area of over 800 square miles.
When a meteorite hits, it expends a huge amount of energy. But meteorites don't just strike in one location, they'll often break up, so there'll be an extended path of destruction.
Is it possible? A piece of the huge meteorite might have broken off hundreds of miles away. According to some theories, this could have created what became known as the Devil's Cemetery.
If this is coupled with hitting something like starting a peat fire or hitting a coal seam, the burning could completely clear an area of forest, and the poisonous gases released and the metals which may enter the soil could poison it and prevent further plant growth.
Rempel's team took rock samples from the site.
We found many unusual things at the Devil's Cemetery. This is one of them. It looks like a meteorite, and maybe it is a melted piece of some object, which exploded or fell down on the Devil's Cemetery.
According to Rempel, when pieces of the rock were tested, the results suggested they were of meteorite origin.
One compound you often find in meteorites is a form of iron. It could be enough to adversely affect sensitive scientific instruments or even make compasses point the wrong way.
Could a fragment of the famous Tunguska meteorite actually lie buried beneath the Devil's Cemetery? Unless a detailed scientific expedition is mounted, further verification of the site's existence and the source of its alleged effects remains unknown. The hunt for the Devil's Cemetery can be fatal, and many who went looking for it never returned. Russia holds many accounts of bizarre creatures. Reports exist from right across the former Soviet Union of a very particular type of unidentified beast. These stories tell of human-like ape men roaming the wilds, bizarre mutants, or just a case of imagination running wild. This is the realm of the Russian wild man. Investigative journalist Nikolai Nepomniachtchi used to work for Russia's famous Around the World magazine. He uncovered a story of a close encounter with a mysterious human-like creature.
It happened in 1963 in one of the former Soviet republics.
The incident occurs on the border between Moldova and Romania. The account tells of a young army lieutenant who'd been out fishing. Suddenly he hears a sound, like someone crying out in pain.
He saw a very strange creature there. It was black and it was completely naked. It was covered by hair and some water plants. The young lieutenant had never seen such a creature in his life, and he was not able to compare it to anything else. But he realized it had been wounded and needed help.
The soldier cautiously approaches.
He could see the creature was bleeding. He bandaged the creature's arm, and the creature seemed to be grateful, but it did not say anything.
Stepping back, the lieutenant continues to watch the strange figure.
The creature stood up. It started walking towards the water and jumped heavily into the river. Then it disappeared.
If this story is true, what had the soldier come across? Given the apparent placid nature of the encounter, it is unlikely to have been a bear. Another explanation would be a person with werewolf syndrome or hypertrichosis, which causes hair to grow all over the body. The encounter is impossible to verify or analyze, but Nikolai believes the soldier made contact with a Russian wild man. Tales of the mysterious Russian wild man, also known as the Almasty or Leshy, have been told for centuries. Reports have emerged of strange human-like creatures spotted in Russia's remotest regions.
Many of the stories describe massive, athletically built bodies covered with hair.
The hair was short. It was not long, but curly.
His height is between 2 and 2.5 meter. His face is intermediate between man and ape.
Lots of people claim to have seen the Russian wild man. Some suggest it's the size of a normal human, but very hairy. Others claim it's considerably larger. Stories of sightings continue to come to light. Russian cryptozoologist Michael Trachtengerz says he uncovered an old letter in the 1990s. It's an eyewitness account written by a geology student called V.N. Markin. The letter recounts events from August 1955, deep in Russia's Caucasus Mountains. Markin and his supervisor are out conducting geological research. They meet a shepherd who tells them about a mysterious creature that has been seen in the woods.
He warned them about wild men living in the mountains. They said going there was dangerous.
But the geologists ignore the warning. They think the idea is preposterous.
They thought it was funny. What wild men? In the Caucasus? It's impossible. And so they continued their trip.
But the day doesn't end well.
On their way back to camp, Markin tripped over a rock and hurt his foot.
Markin sustains a serious injury, but it turns out to be the least of their problems. Back at their tent, the two men find a scene of devastation. The shepherd's story is fresh in their mind. They start to feel they are not alone in the forest. Markin writes,
Our belongings were taken out of our backpacks and were scattered on the ground. All the fresh food was gone.
Maybe a bear had stumbled into their camp. But then around the site, the men notice what appears to them to be large human-like footprints.
There were footprints. They could distinguish toes.
The geologists are mystified. Could the tales about a wild man be true? The pair are clearly unsettled, but night is falling. Having repaired their tent, they settle down for the evening. But in the early hours, Markin is awoken. He writes,
I got my head out of my sleeping bag, trying to make as little noise as possible. I opened the tent very quietly and looked out.
Standing just outside the tent, Markin is face to face with what appears to be a large, human-like creature. High in the Caucasus Mountains, a story tells of a Russian geologist's encounter with a mysterious human-like creature. Afterwards, he sends a letter to cryptozoologist Michael Trachtengerz. Markin writes,
I saw a chunky man standing 5 steps away from my tent. I reached to wake up my friend Pavel, but was stopped by a sudden pain in my foot. I couldn't help but shout out.
When he looks out again, the creature is gone. He grabs his notepad.
And here is the drawing Markin sent us.
Markin claims he saw a large figure with human form, but covered in hair. Many people from across the former Soviet Union claim to have evidence of what they believe to be the Russian wild man.
I made a cast of this footprint myself in Tajikistan in 1979.
This is handprint of wild man that was detected by us in Tianshan.
This is a piece of fur, a piece of flesh, and a piece of skin.
While some wild man evidence has now been identified as coming from bears, much still remains unexplained. Those that believe the wild man does exist have great faith in what their evidence can reveal.
According to size of this footprint, we detected that mass of this object was about 200 kilograms. It was a very big animal.
But are these footprints real evidence or wishful thinking? Casts are easy to misinterpret or even to fake. One-on-one encounters or sightings by their nature cannot be independently verified, and some reports have now been explained as wild animals.
I realize that science needs proof, a body to put on the table, to study it with a knife and microscope. However, I oppose the idea of hunting this creature.
Maybe the reports of the Russian wild man are just people who don't want to be found, escapees from Russia's infamous Gulag prisons, or people who want no part of modern life. In Russia's vast wilderness forests, testable scientific evidence is hard to come by. For the time being, tales of the Russian wild man remain in the realm of myth and legend. From within Russia's many files of the unexplained, there are eyewitness reports of bizarre and baffling encounters in the remote and desolate mountains.
It's a huge country with very many different environments, climates. The climate in itself is so inhospitable that living here is often a miracle.
These mysterious sightings can sometimes end with deadly consequences. A group of climbers walking in the remote mountains pitch their tent, but not all of them will survive the night. This is one man's story of his encounter with a mysterious entity. It attacks the group, causing severe burns, and leaves one of them dead. This shocking encounter occurs in the Karachayevo region of Russia's Caucasus Mountains. The leader of the ill-fated expedition is expert mountaineer Vladimir Kavunyenko.
Mountaineering is so exciting. After you climb your first mountain, other things become unimportant.
Vladimir tells how, on the 17th of August 1978, he led a group of friends for a weekend of mountaineering.
I always like taking new routes and often go to places that have never been visited before.
But not all the group are as experienced as Vladimir. One of the team, Yuri Vizbor, decides the route might be too challenging. Yuri decides to stay behind at base camp. As a keen musician, he sends the group off with a song, but he has a bad feeling about the trip.
Yuri kept telling me, "Don't go there. I feel that something bad is going to happen." The course was bad weather in the mountains, bad weather. This time there is a problem with the weather. The nature seems to be in deep sorrow.
И весь вечер гоняем чаи, лишь бы те, кто сейчас на маршруте, завтра в лагерь спуститься смогли.
The group make good progress. And that evening, they pitch their tent on the mountainside. Little do they know what horrors they will face in the night. Mountaineer Vladimir Kavunyenko tells the story of how he led a group of climbers into the Caucasus Mountains. Setting up camp for the night, they're about to encounter a mysterious and deadly phenomenon.
Our tent was very small. That's why we had to sleep head to toe.
Vladimir swaps places with his friend Oleg. This simple action will have significant repercussions. That night, the weather closes in. Alone in the mountains, nothing could have prepared the climbers for what happens next. Vladimir recalls that around 2 in the morning, he is woken by a terrifying sight.
It looked like a tennis ball glowing like phosphor.
Vladimir is hypnotized by this strange vision.
I was unable to move my hands, my legs. I was kind of paralyzed, and I was very frightened. And then it started coming into direct contact with us.
The fireball is incredibly hot. It burns through the climbers' sleeping bags and scorches their skin on impact.
It was very painful, very painful. It was as if I was being burnt with an electric welding torch. There was a smell of burnt meat in the air. It was very hot.
The heat is so intense they're unable to move. Vladimir's friend Oleg is struck 3 times.
Can you imagine burning skin and meat, and the burn was so deep that you could see the charring?
Eventually, the searing pain is too much for Vladimir to bear.
I lost consciousness and could not understand what was going on.
As suddenly as it arrived, the mysterious ball of fire vanishes. The group are once more plunged into darkness, alone on the mountainside.
As soon as I was conscious again, I was trying to work out what to do next. My leg was badly burnt, as were other parts of my body. I had been touched by the light 8 times.
Finding the radio, Vladimir gets his friend Victor to call for help. They try to rouse Oleg, who's been lying by the tent door. He's severely burnt and remains motionless. It takes a while for the rescuers to arrive, but when they do, they're horrified.
I can't tell you what the doctor said, because he was speaking in such strong language. He was shocked at what he saw.
Vladimir's friend Oleg has no pulse. Despite attempts to revive him, he's pronounced dead at the scene. The mountaineers are taken to hospital, where they're treated for severe burns. Because of the complexity of their injuries, Vladimir says they all require urgent surgery and multiple skin grafts.
Here's one burn. It used to be big and reached down to the bone.
So what attacked the climbers so savagely? With only Vladimir's testimony to go by, it's impossible to know for sure what happened. But he's certain it was a rare and mysterious phenomenon that has been reported in mountains around the world.
I believe that it was ball lightning.
For scientific investigators, reports of ball lightning can often be explained as optical illusions or the result of overactive imaginations.
We know so little about ball lightning, it's very hard to separate the myth from the reality. Ball lightning is said to appear as a glowing ball which moves erratically around a location.
This ties in with Vladimir's description.
Anything the ball lightning touches will be exposed to a large amount of energy, and so if it was to hit a human, it would almost certainly burn them.
This explains the horrendous injuries the climbers sustained. Only recently have scientists come up with a possible theory as to how these balls of fire might be created.
You need two main things for ball lightning to form. You need a lot of particulate matter in the atmosphere, and you also need a high energy source, something like a lightning strike.
One theory suggests when lightning hits the ground, it can throw up fragments of soil. It's these particles that become superheated balls of plasma. Based on this theory, it's possible to recreate ball lightning in the lab. Mixing melted wax with burnt matches creates a source of particles. This mixture is then placed in a microwave oven. The microwaves superheat the particles just like a lightning strike.
So the particles would have been ignited by the energy from the microwave, this forming this stable plasma which we call ball lightning. That was quite a small amount of material which has done quite a large amount of damage to our microwave. If you think of that on a larger scale, with the energy coming from a lightning strike, the damage it could do to a human is immense.
Vladimir says it took 6 months for his burns to heal, but his spirit of adventure will never be quenched.
You can't help a person who has fallen in love with the mountains. Once you have become mad about the mountains, it becomes impossible to cure this craziness.
Along with mysterious cases of the unexplained, the Russian archives also contain details of shocking medical experiments. This was a time of politically driven goals and dubious ethics.
Russia has a very big, complicated, powerful, and inscrutable government. The purpose of controlling information for the Soviet Union was to project an image of itself as successful, powerful.
One of the most chilling accounts dates from the 1920s. Footage reveals that Soviet scientists create monstrous abominations and even attempt to raise the dead. While many science facilities were hidden in the snowy wastelands, this disturbing case occurs in the heart of Moscow. The story centers on Russian surgeon Sergei Brihunenko. He's witnessed the horrors of the First World War. And now his studies focus on the possibility of transplanting organs.
These scientists wanted to know how the organs work in the body, how the different organs worked. And that's very difficult to do because the organs are trapped inside you, and people, they tend not to work when you take them out of someone or something.
If a healthy organ can successfully replace a dying one, then perhaps one day death itself could be conquered. Brihunenko investigates the possibility of keeping organs alive when removed from a body. He invents a primitive life support machine called the autojector.
It was this sort of contraption of glass and plastic tubing or rubber tubing, and the goal was to supply blood and take waste blood away and reoxygenate it, warm it up and put it back into an organ.
He begins to experiment on animals. By connecting the autojector to the blood vessels of a dog's heart, he's able to keep it beating outside the body. But Bryhunenko is far from done. He wants to keep something much larger alive. What about the whole head of an animal? Russian surgeon Professor Sergei Gliantsev has studied Bryhunenko's work in great detail.
He took a dog, cut its head off the body, and injected medications into the vessels of the head. Blood must be oxygenated. That's why he also took 2 tubes and joined them with the lungs of another dog.
Bryhunenko then connects the severed dog's head and another dog's lungs to his autojector machine, and the device is switched on. As the blood starts flowing around the system, the lungs begin to pump. Shockingly, the head comes back to life. The dog's eyes blink, its facial muscles twitch. The head persists in this undead state for 3.5 hours, until mercifully, all signs of life cease. Films of these experiments are released in the early 1940s. Briefly, there is a flurry of worldwide interest in what the Soviet scientists are doing.
This amazing living head separated from the body shocked people not only in the USSR, but in the whole world.
When this video was shown and it was confirmed that Bryhunenko was able to keep these animals alive, it caught the public imagination in a big way. And people started to think, you know, wouldn't this be fantastic, an immortality machine that would keep me alive forever?
But the Iron Curtain is closing around Soviet Russia. The West hears nothing more. But the research continues in secret. Behind the Iron Curtain, gruesome animal experiments are conducted away from the eyes of the West. The files name a second Russian surgeon, Vladimir Demikov. He wants to investigate the way organs are controlled by the brain. In doing so, he creates a monster.
Demikov was not a doctor, he was a biologist. He took small animals' heads, such as the heads of puppies, and transplanted them to the necks of some adult dogs.
Demikov creates a two-headed dog.
You're looking at it, and suddenly you see a second head on its neck.
The smaller dog would bite the ears and nibble at the larger dog, and they would fight with each other in that way.
People who see the dog are shocked. Even Demikov's boss has reservations.
He forbade him to do this. He said, "I can't look at this dog. Don't do this anymore."
But through this gruesome experiment, Demikov pushes forward the frontiers of science. He can now explore the role of the nervous system in controlling a body's organs.
No one had done that before. No one knew about that.
While Demikov continues his work on dogs, Sergei Bryhunenko wants to go one step further and work on humans. In the 1930s, Bryhunenko turns his attention to the idea of reanimation. Is it possible to bring a dead body back to life?
They took the body of a man who had died in surgery the day before, connected it to this machine. And after about 15 minutes in this still room with nothing but the machine clicking away, there was a death rattle that came out of this man's throat. And all of a sudden his eyes flickered, and it seemed to everyone in the room that he was coming back to life. Ryukonenko himself and his assistant were suddenly mortified by what they'd done and were terrified of the consequences of bringing someone back from the dead if they really could, and they turned the machine off, and to this day we don't know if it really would have worked.
The Soviet scientists achieved what was long thought impossible. From keeping organs alive outside the body to transplanting organs, and possibly even reanimating the dead, if only temporarily. But was the research justified?
People are still asking these questions. People are still dealing with questions regarding organ transplantation based on moral and ethical problems. Does a man have a right to intrude into God's creation and do something that God hasn't done?
If you could bring someone back from the dead, then it meant there wasn't really a soul. It meant that a body was just a machine, and if one component in it broke, then you could just fix it with another machine.
Controversial as it sounds, Bryhunenko and Demikov's work are both used today as the basis for modern life support technologies and organ transplant procedures.
The justification for this work is saving lives, and it's always been about saving lives. This was a medical advance at the time. This is a medical advance that we couldn't really have done without.
But who can say how far the original experiments proceeded behind the veil of the Iron Curtain, and what other abominations were created, animal or human? Soviet Russia contained secrets that were concealed for decades behind the Iron Curtain. But in the 25 years since the fall of Soviet communism, the contents of many of these case files have slowly come to light. Some of the mysterious encounters and eyewitness reports now have rational explanations. Other stories seem destined to remain a mystery. For Mother Russia does not give up her secrets so easily.